Hi friends, welcome back to At Home with Holly. My name's Holly and I'm so glad that you're here today. So this project that we're going to be doing today, we are going to be making bone broth from the beef bones that I have from the quarter of the cow that I purchased, and also French onion soup because we are not only eating through our freezer, and that means that big bag of bones that's in there needs to get out and get roasted and made into bone broth and canned up to create room in our freezer. And also, I have onions that are, although they're storage onions and could last for a very long time, I noticed a couple of them were a little soft, and I thought, you know what, before any of the rest of them get soft or they need to be used up in a hurry, let's go ahead and make them into something yummy. So, we're going to be doing bone broth, French onion soup, diced onions for the freezer, all the things. So, I'm so glad that you're here. Let's get started. I actually put the bones and all that stuff in the oven and got them roasting. So they've actually been roasting for 24 hours. So let me take you back to how we got here.
So besides the fact that I love knowing where my food comes from, so when I purchased the quarter of a cow from my local farmer, I know how the cows were raised. I know that they were treated not just humanely, but wonderfully. They had an awesome life and it's right down the road from me and all that kind of stuff. And that they were raised and fed the way I would have done it if I had the land. But also you get these bonus products, like you get the tallow if you want it, like the fat, you get the bones, you get, all these cuts that normally you wouldn't be able to find in the grocery store. And you get them from an animal that was raised grass-fed, grass-finished, or however you would like it. So I'm taking a moment to take these bones. They're frozen. I'm spraying them down with an avocado oil spray. I'm going to salt and pepper them. And then I'm going to get these roasting in the oven. I'm going to put them in at about, I think I put them in at 375 for an hour or two, just not very long, but just enough to get some good color. My butcher did an amazing job and there's hardly any meat left on there, but sometimes there's meat left on there and you definitely are going to want to pick that off after you have simmered the bones for a while. But in this case, they were pretty clean, so I got them in the oven to get roasting.
So this is what we have left from our storage onions that we grew. Most of them are pretty good. A couple of them are a little soft. And I thought, well, let's take the day. So I'm gonna chop some of them into thin strips for French onion soup and then dice the rest for just to have in the freezer for when we're cooking.
So I started chopping these or slicing them and dicing them and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is going to be great. I've got enough for French onion soup. The recipe calls for 4 pounds. I'll separate those out. And then I'll have all these diced ones for the freezer. And I started looking at how many I had. And I was like, okay, let's make another product too. And so I love caramelized onions. I love them. I love them. I love them. That's why I love French onion soup. But they take a long time to do. It's a labor of love for sure. So I decided last year I cooked them in the roaster oven and was able to can them using that recipe from that 1870s homestead with Rachel. And this year I wanted to try something a little bit different. So we're going to caramelize them and freeze them in like single servings, kind of like we do with the garlic and ginger and stuff that we've done. So I did end up chopping a lot more for caramelized onions than I thought I was going to. But it was awesome because I got it all done at once. So pretty good.
So we have 4 pounds of onions. I separated out 4 pounds. And I'm going to slice these from, this is where the stem was and this is where the roots were, or vice versa. You're going to cut it from the long way to long way because it holds up better to the cooking process for French onion soup. So since this is going to be going through the canner, I really want it, since it's going to be cooked twice essentially, I really want it to hold up and not be mush, but be soft and wonderful. So I'm gonna get these sliced and put in their own bowl so that they're ready for us to caramelize just for that soup.
So like we were talking about before, I started this process just chopping or slicing the 4 pounds needed for the French onion soup. And then as I started realizing just how many onions I had more than the 4 pounds, I was like, okay, this is really cool. So I just kind of went into like sous chef mode and just started thinking, okay, I'll just chop all these up so that I have options for tomorrow. And, you know, when it cooks down, it's going to be this much. And so I started getting pretty excited about having more and more of them sliced for caramelized onions. And then, of course, I got out my favorite little kitchen tool lately, which is my little chopper that dices and slices and does all the stuff. And I was able to get the remaining amount of onions that I had all diced up into these cute little petite dices so that I can bag them up in food saver bags. Okay, I have all these beautifully diced purple onions, red onions. I don't know why they're called red onions when they're purple, but excuse me. So I have all of these beautiful diced red onions, and I have freezer, what are these called? Vacuum pack, like food saver bags. So I'm going to measure out so that I can keep these frozen. I have, we did together the shallots diced this way, and those are in silicone reusable bags because I'll use those up in the next month or two. But these will stay good longer, and protect from freezer burn and stuff in my deep freezer. So I'm going to get these in like 2-cup increments into here. I have found that a canning funnel works really well for filling these bags. So 1, 2. I just try to, if you think of all the convenience items that are at the grocery store, they sell frozen chopped onions, they sell frozen chopped bell peppers, frozen chopped, all the things. So when I'm growing stuff, a way to preserve it is to think of how I would use it as a convenience food, and frozen chopped organic homegrown onions that are going to be good in the freezer for over a year, that's a convenience item for sure. This one was about a 1/2 cup short, so I'm just going to steal some of the ones from the pile that are going to be for caramelized onions. Get them chopped the same way. And add it to the ones we've already got. There we go. So these would have been just fine to put in freezer bags and store in the freezer, but since I do have a lot of already chopped shallots and onions in some silicone freezer bags, I wanted to put these in the food saver bags so they would stay fresher for even longer in the deep freezer. Ready for the freezer. So we're going to caramelize these onions in 2 different places so that we can keep the amounts separate. So for the French onion soup, we're going to go ahead and do them in the on top of the stove, and then for the caramelized onions just to be able to use in the future, we're going to do that in the crock pot actually, so a little more hands off. So in this, I'm going to add a little bit of avocado oil and a little bit of butter just to get these things going. All right, this looks good. I'm going to get it on the stove. Same thing. We're going to put just a little bit of butter, a little bit of avocado oil just to get things going. And we're going to put all of our sliced onions in here. If we can get them all in to start, great. If not, after an hour or so after it cooks down, I'll be able to add more. Look at the beautiful color we got on that. So we've roasted all of these bones.
You can see all the marrow. Oh my goodness, how delicious is this broth going to be? Okay, I'm going to get all of this into my roaster oven, and then I'm going to get it covered with some water, and it's going to just go low and slow for all day today, overnight, and then tomorrow we'll see what it looks like in the afternoon. Okay, so we have our bones sitting in water. We have our onions getting started. We're just going to put a cover on this and let it go low and slow. This one is going to go low and slow for at least one whole day, like 24 to 36 hours. And this one is going to go low and slow all day. So I did save like the tops and the big chunks of onions that I cut off. Some of them. I had a big bowl full. I don't need that many. I already have several bags of it in the freezer. So that's all going to go into the compost. But for this, sometimes I add like apple cider vinegar, onions, carrots, veggie scraps, all that stuff to my broth. Today, I think I want to do more of just a pure bone broth, but I am going to reserve just this amount in case after tonight, if I am like, you know what, I wish I had put veggies in it. I'm going to go ahead and save these and I might add them tomorrow. I don't like to add veggies right from the beginning. It tends, in my opinion, I think it gets the broth just a little bit bitter if the veggies go too long. So I want the bones to do most of the heavy lifting, and then I might add some of these at the end. We want them to get sweet and soft and a nice brown color. We don't want them to burn. We just want them to get like a nice caramel color, caramelized onions. So we keep stirring these, and we want this to take a while. You don't want this to happen in 5 minutes. This is a labor of love. That's why we're doing a big pot, and then we're going to have them ready to go when we want a little bit of extra flavor in the future. I love using caramelized onions in grilled cheese. I like to make homemade French onion dip. I like it if I'm making beef stroganoff to add this in. All kinds of ways. So we'll just keep stirring this every few minutes. Gonna add some salt and pepper. Some white wine. I had a box of this left over from the summer's cooking project, so figured I'd use this up. If you don't like cooking with wine, then just go ahead and use broth. I like cooking with wine, but if you're going to cook with wine, cook with a wine that you would actually drink, because it's just going to intensify the flavor. So we're going to use this to deglaze the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and scrape all the brown bits off the bottom. And the wine's just going to loosen all that up. I almost forgot. You're supposed to add a half a cup. We're going to add a half a cup of the liquid aminos. If you've never used it, this is like, it just adds that umami, that flavor that makes you really happy. Or you can substitute anything that calls for soy sauce. You can substitute this, but it is delicious. So we need a half a cup of that. And we're just going to let that simmer for just a few more minutes. And then we'll be done with this step. Okay, you guys, this is what we're looking like. Most of the wine has evaporated off. The liquid aminos is in there, just a little bit more. Just a little bit is left in there of that. So what I'm going to do is turn this off now, because I'm going to wait. I'm going to stop this right here. I'm going to wait till tomorrow when our broth is done and use the new broth that we're making to use in this French onion soup. Smells incredible though. Now these obviously have a lot longer to go, but it's only been about an hour and they're already starting to soften. So I'm going to take some tongs, just kind of zhuzh them up, and I'll come back in another hour or two. Now you don't need to do this, but I'm here. So I'm going to do it and then go about the rest of my day for a little bit. It's been about 4 hours. Just giving it a good stir. Oh, you're fogging up. Just giving it a good stir. Oh, that's an inner part. Got a little more to go yet. About halfway done. Okay, so I actually took all of the onions out of the crock pot because I felt like there was too much liquid sitting in the bottom. So I took it out and I put it in here for about 10 minutes to like on high to let it like evaporate. This color came from when it was in the crock pot, so it did a good job on that. But it was kind of just like steaming them and I wanted them to get, you know, a little sweeter. So this is ready for us to bag it up, or divide it up anyways. And this guy just bubbling away, and he'll just keep going too. Okay, it's the next morning, and some of the bones, all the marrow has come out, but a few of the other bones still have a good bit. There's still a good bit. Well, not a good bit, but there's still some. There's still a little left in there. So I'm gonna let it go a little longer. Smells amazing though. So here we are, and I have my onions, my caramelized onions that have been seasoned with thyme and salt and pepper and liquid aminos. I've got my broth that's been going for 24 hours, and it tastes amazing. A lot of times when I make bone broth, when I first started, I would watch all these people on YouTube and they said, don't salt it because, you want to salt it when you're cooking with it. I I don't like the taste of broth unless it's salted. So, and anytime you would buy broth from, just for in my personal opinion, anytime you would buy broth, bone broth or stock or whatever from the store, even the low sodium one has been salted so that salt just brings out the flavor of what's in it. So I really like the way this tastes right now. I did salt it with Redmond's real salt. I threw in a couple tablespoons, let it go for a little bit, threw in a couple more, just kind of taste it as I went. So, not too much salt. It's not salty. You can definitely taste the beef though. So I'm excited about using that. So what we're going to do is this recipe will make 8 pint jars of French onion soup. So I'm going to use the broth that's right out of here. I've got my digital pressure canner ready to go. So I'm going to select 60 minutes for pints. I don't know if I can fit all 8 in here. So if I can't fit all 8 in here, I'll do 2 rounds, or I'll add some broth in the second round just to make it. You can't run a canner without the minimum amount of jars in there. So I think I can fit in 8 jars. It's either 7 or 8. So we'll see. But you want to, when you're running a canner, you can put different things in there. Assuming they all need to be pressure canned or they all need to be water bath canned. So the broth, the soup, all of it needs to be pressure canned. So we're good there. But whatever needs the longest is the time that you set it for. So it's not going to hurt just a couple pints of broth to go in there for 40 minutes longer because it's just not going to hurt them. So we're going to do that if we need to make another canner load. So it says insert jars. So it's basically just going to be sitting there waiting for us. So we're going to get 8 jars ready to go into the canner. These have all been cleaned when they got put away, but then I just reran them through my dishwasher last night so that I had these ready to go. Okay, we're gonna get 8 jars. You guys, it is freezing rain out today, and it's going to switch over to snow, and we're about to get our Arctic blast with the negative temperatures. So I hope that everyone's out there is staying warm and dry and safe. So now in the recipe, I'll link the recipe below in the description. In the recipe, it says to mix it all with the broth and put it in. I'm just going to do this to make sure each jar gets the same amount of onions to broth ratio. So I'm just going to put in 1 scoop to each jar, and then we'll top off with more if there's more. This is a 1/2 cup scoop. This onion mixture smells so good. Just rich and delicious. And this is soup weather for sure in Ohio right now. Although honestly, I enjoy soup all year round. Well, that worked out perfectly. Okay. Great. Okay. Want to get every last bit of this yummy goodness. Okay. Now we're going to get our broth and get it added to these jars. So I want to take one extra step with the broth before we put it in these jars. So I'm just going to slide these up. Now, this broth is still in its like raw form, if you will. So it hasn't been strained. It hasn't been, a lot of times with broth, when it's all the way done cooking, I will take out all the bones and I will stick it, if it's winter, I'll stick it in my garage with the cover on it. Because it's too big to go in my fridge. And what will happen is the fat layer will rise to the top and solidify, so I can just scoop it out. Sometimes I do that just to make sure that the broth that I'm canning is not too fatty. And then I also like to run it through a nut bag. These are reusable instead of cheesecloth. Nothing wrong with cheesecloth if you have it, or just the strainer. I've done that too. But I want to get some pretty broth. If you guys have been with me, you know I do pretty broth and ugly broth. Ugly broth is you just dump it in the pints and can it. And the pretty broth, you take the time to like strain it and separate the fat and stuff. So I want to do pretty broth for these soup jars. It smells so good. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Okay, I've got these. I'm going to slide this. Okay, so we should need, so if those were, we should need about 3.5 cups per jar, 3.5 times 8. Oh my gosh. We're going to start with, oh my gosh, how beautiful. This is piping hot. Okay, we'll leave this here for a minute. And, ouch, that bowl was even hot. Oh my goodness. All right, hot things, my friends. Be careful. Okay, that's going to keep draining in there. I'm going to get, I don't know why I was thinking 3.5. It should be 1, possibly 1.5. We're going to 1-inch headspace. And of course, since the onions are at the bottom, we are definitely going to debubble and kind of mix these things together before we close up the lids, for sure. Let me get this up here so you guys can see a little better. Now, I did not use the onion skins, the purple onions, red onion skins that usually will give the broth an even darker color. But I still have them reserved, so I might. I don't know, I'm pretty happy with the flavor. I don't want to mess with it too much. There we go. That should be enough for us to get through the last 4 jars. Maybe a little more. I might need a little more, but we'll see. My cat just knocked over a pile of cups. Cats are fun, huh? Curious cat. That is what I have. Very curious. And that was a pile of cups that was supposed to be put in the counter, in the cabinet. And she was very curious why it was sitting on the counter where it's not supposed to be. All right, put this there to keep training. I'm gonna need a little more. That's awesome. Okay. Always want to make sure before you can it that it tastes good. And so when that got blended together, wow, that is really, ooh, that's good. Okay. This is wonderful. Let me get some vinegar so I can wipe these rims. Wow, that is so good. Wow. Okay, that's really good. Okay, just checked, and the water temperature inside my canner is warm but not hot. So you just want to make sure there's not a temperature shock. So you wouldn't want cold water in there since these jars are now hot from the broth. But warm is fine. We're going to go finger tight. Eight jars. We love it when a plan comes together. Oops. Okay. Now we're going to push the button so it says to insert jars. We're going to tell it we did that, and it's going to walk us through every step of this process. And while it's canning, we are going to preserve our caramelized onions that we made yesterday. We left them in the slow cooker all day, and like I told you in the earlier, they got dark, and they were more like a steamed onion than a caramelized one. Last year I did it in my roaster oven, and I think the roaster oven or the stovetop versus a slow cooker, I don't know that I'd do the slow cooker again. It did the job, but I had to finish the job on the stovetop. Maybe if I had been more patient, it would have finished the job. But it felt like it was just going to keep steaming instead of. So anyway, if you guys have any experience with doing caramelized onions in a slow cooker, and maybe I just need to be more patient, but this is what we did. We finished them off on the stovetop, so we're going to get those, and we're going to get those preserved up. Last year I canned them. I got the recipe and the idea from that 1870s homestead, Rachel, and they turned out well, and it was really nice to have them on hand, shelf stable. But I think that they got like mushier, if that makes sense. Like they got a little mushy. The flavor was great, but they got a little mushy. So I could can them again because the flavor is great and it's worth it. But I kind of want to try something new this year. I have about 4 of the little half pints left of them, so I still have those if I need them. But I'd like to do something a little different. So I think I'm going to freeze them. I think I'm going to freeze them in little pucks, just like we do with the garlic and the ginger. We made little pucks. I think I might do that, except bigger pucks, if that makes sense. Basically, muffin tins. I'm going to use muffin tin size frozen pucks of caramelized onions. And that way, they should be able to just pop them out and use them whenever I need them. So I'm going to get the supplies for that. We're going to use silicone muffin liners and a muffin pan. We'll see how it goes. So I think this should work. Okay, so here are our beautiful, sweet smelling caramelized onions. So like I said, the color, I'm not mad at all about this color. So I'm going to put, well, yeah, I'm going to put, got a third of a cup scoop. I might need a smaller one. And I'm just going to put, might need a smaller one. I think that's actually going to be pretty great. I'm going to get spoons. Think it might be easier. Yes. These look really good. I'm super happy with them. I'm going to put a layer of parchment paper down in between each layer and go put them in the deep freezer. Yeah. So our first round is done. We're going to get out our yummy French onion soup. And I have the broth cooling in the garage with the lid on so that I can skim the fat layer off the top and get that in some jars as well. And then when I took the bones out, when I took it out to the garage, I noticed that when I was looking for the bone, I pulled out some of the bones and some of them still had a little bit of marrow in it. So what I did was I pulled all the bones out, put them in this pot, filled it with water, and I'm going to let that go for a couple hours and see how it's looking. Maybe we'll get a second round of some broth. I will bring you back. Ooh. Now, on this round in the canner, I did forget to put in, if you put in a little splash of vinegar in the water when you're canning, you won't get the white hard water marks on your jars. And you can see this one's got, I don't know if you can see that on camera, just a little bit of white film on it. No big deal. It'll clean off with some when I clean the jars. But just a heads up, if you want to avoid that, put in a splash of vinegar. Not too much because you'll get some rust. Just a splash of vinegar in the water. So I will bring you guys back here so you can see what it looks like when we take all the jars out of the broth that we're going to make. So we're going to can up the broth. Ooh, starting to pop already. I'm excited. Okay, good morning, friends. So it is the next morning, and I just put these both. I put both pots in my garage so that the fat could solidify and be easy to scoop off the top. I put them in the garage with the lid on so that they got nice and cold but didn't freeze. So I'm going to scoop all of the fat into here, and then I'm going to get all of the broth into their jars, wipe the rims, put on clean lids and bands, and then get them in the pressure canner. They're pints, so they're going to pressure can for 20 minutes each. So I'm going to get these things all jarred up.
So again, I do recommend skimming off the fat every time, but the extra step of running it all through a nut bag or a cheesecloth, not necessary, but I was looking for some pretty broth, so I took the extra step today.
Okay guys, this is what the broth is looking like coming out of the canner. We've got our broth, the ones with the onion skins and without. And we've got our French onion soup. Looking good. Okay guys, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with me in the kitchen while we did broth and caramelized onions and French onion soup and all the things. So I appreciate you guys so much for all the likes and the shares and the comments. I just appreciate you so much. It means the world to my family. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, friends.